Jeff mentioned some of our live feeds, and we'd really like to know how many of these you're already using. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll, and if you guys could share your usage, we'd really appreciate it. All right, I'll share those results. And I'm glad that so many of you are here to learn more about this. And Daniel's going to show us what great live feeds we have. And I will share his presentation now.
All right, thank you, Lene and Jeff. That is really great stuff. For those of you who are watching this and getting a bit excited, I want to assure you that it isn't just aspirational. You can replicate all of what Jeff just showed you in your own jurisdiction much more quickly and easily than you might think. And one of your most important resources for doing so is ArcGIS Online and a product we call the Living Atlas of the World. So for those of you who haven't worked with it before, what is the Living Atlas? I'll go through this really quick. Over the past few years, content has become a key part of the ArcGIS platform. It's no longer just tools and workflows. Data is now part of the product, and we want to make sure you can access that data seamlessly across all of your apps in Desktop and Pro and through the APIs. We also want to make data discovery easy and to make sure that there's a rich set of authoritative data services ready for your use. So that's what the Living Atlas is, authoritative, ready-to-use layers that you can get access to with the press of a button. Just think of it as a curated subset of the web services in ArcGIS Online. We've selected the best of the truly important content and integrated it with the ArcGIS platform to make the data discovery quick and painless. That way you can get application earlier. Nothing will ever be possible without some local data and surveys, of course, but our goal is to fill in gaps in your knowledge wherever possible and provide you with ready-to-use, up-to-date content. The Living Atlas includes layers developed and hosted by Esri, maps made by the user community, along with those provided by our business partners like Digital Globe and AccuWeather. So these are the themes of the Living Atlas to make browsing and filtering easier. So the most important theme for us today is Earth observations. That is where most of the stuff relevant to disaster response goes. So how do you use the Living Atlas? The first way that most people check out the Living Atlas is by going to our website at livingatlas.arcgis.com. You can browse all of the Atlas's content and click the Open In button to open a layer in Desktop or in ArcGIS Online. When you're in the ArcGIS Online map viewer, it's just as easy. Click the Add button, and right there it says Browse Living Atlas Layers. From here you can see all the same layers, and with one more click you can add them to your map. So you can see now we have added this layer showing live wind and weather conditions to the map, and you can click anywhere in the world to see the current air temperature, wind speed, and humidity. In ArcGIS Pro, there are actually two ways to access the Living Atlas. In the project pane on your right, you can access your portal, and there's a button to search the Living Atlas. And you can also click the Add Data button here, and in addition to your local directories, it is possible to search Portal and the Living Atlas from here. All right, so now that we're all on the same page, let's get to the good stuff. What is in the Living Atlas for you? Well, the heart of our program is a set of 20 layers hosted by Esri itself. These are the live feeds we've been talking about, web maps that update themselves every 15 minutes based on data from government sources. So our most used layer this year was the active hurricanes layer. It shows all active hurricanes across the world, their tracks, and the forecast probability cone. There's also a recent hurricanes layer with the tracks of every storm this season, And maps.com provides a historic layer with tracks going all the way back to 1924. And just in the last few weeks, we added a layer with all the evacuation routes from the Homeland Infrastructure Foundation. There's a layer called recent earthquakes that lets you symbolize by magnitude or by significance and shows the shake map as well. Here's the 8.0 that was detected near Alaska on Tuesday and its aftershocks. There's also a really interesting earthquake risk map that the USGS developed for planning and risk assessment. We have a lot of layers about current weather conditions, all the real-time alerts from the National Weather Service, watches, warnings, storm reports, plus that global layer of weather stations and wind that I showed you earlier. And then we have real-time precipitation maps from NEXRAD as well. And then there's a set of forecasts from the National Digital Forecast Database. There are 3-day forecasts of precipitation, snowfall, wind speed, wind gust, and smoke. You can actually animate these predictions in 6-hour intervals over the next 3 days, either incrementally or cumulatively. These are very powerful layers that I encourage you all to take a look at and make use of. Here's what it looks like when you kind of throw all these together. This is our severe weather public information map. And the point is you can make maps like this too. Just add these layers, hit save, and don't worry about it. The map will update itself in real time as conditions on the ground change. The USA Wildfire Activity Map provides real-time fire reports and even the perimeter of the burn area when available. There's also a layer showing thermal anomalies from MODIS imagery that can be useful for detecting wildfires globally. And finally, wildfire hazard potential from the Forest Service, because a penny of prevention is worth $1 of cure. There's been a lot of exciting development recently around flood response. This map shows a number of layers I've already mentioned, the precipitation forecast, the current NEXRAD radar, flash flood warnings from the National Weather Service. And then there's those dots. That's the live stream gauge layer, which is actually a global data service combining real-time stream flow observations from over a dozen different sensor networks with over 20,000 individual gauges from around the planet. Then there's our newest addition to the live feeds program, the National Water Model. NOAA released this forecasting service 1.5 years ago, and we host a series of map services you can use to take advantage of it in GIS. The National Water Model provides forecasts for every river in the United States. So instead of just looking at stream gauges and the precipitation forecast, it's now possible to click on any river reach you are worried about and get an explicit stream flow forecast. There's a 10-day forecast with 3-hour intervals, updated 4 times a day, and a short-term 18-hour forecast, updated every hour. We've created 2 maps out of each forecast, one showing the estimated stream flow and one showing the stream flow anomaly, so you can see how conditions differ from normal. This layer was used heavily by emergency responders in Texas during the recent flooding there, and we'd love to support more of you incorporating this valuable data service into your operations. It's both a map that you can use to visualize storm forecasts on a map viewer, as well as through the API you can query any individual reach and get streamflow forecasts and alerts into mobile apps and navigation tools and so on. Of course, there are also hundreds of other layers in the Living Atlas you might find useful beyond our live feeds program. I'd especially like to draw your attention to the demographics theme, where there are many useful layers you can use for risk assessment and impact analysis. Jeff showed you this earlier, but I just want to stress that it isn't just about total population. There are also maps that highlight vulnerable populations like the elderly and children, which are crucial for planning your response. These layers can estimate number of households without vehicles, number of people that don't speak English, and so on. Live traffic, satellite imagery are also in the Living Atlas. There's just a ton more to discover if you go in there to browse yourself. But yeah, I really think that this demographic geo-enrichment stuff would be a really great place to start. looking at how you can take a disaster area and learn more about who's going to be affected within it. So if you have layers that you are hosting that you think should be in the Living Atlas, you can actually contribute to it. Just go to livingatlas.arcgis.com/contribute, and you can access this app here that will show you all of your items that you've registered with ArcGIS online, and scores all of them in terms of how well you've filled out the metadata about them. Not, not how good the data is or how useful it is, but just in terms of completeness, in terms of how well you've filled out the metadata. And once you have all of that filled out satisfactorily, you can hit that Nominate Now button. And when you do that, it will show up on a list in front of us, the curators, and we can let your layer into the Living Atlas so that everyone else who's browsing it looking for valuable data can discover yours. And you can discover data being shared by other people in your community who maybe you don't know personally, but you can, this is a great way to make sure you aren't replicating each other's work. If you're all sharing your analysis and your layers with the Living Atlas, then we can form a disaster response community within each jurisdiction that is aware of what everyone else is doing, leveraging each other's work, and making sure not to duplicate effort when it isn't necessary. So what are we looking for when one of your nominations shows up on our desk? In addition to that the metadata is filled out well and that the data is authoritative and useful and valuable, we're also looking for a lot of things like how well designed the cartography is. Is it, are the colors on there right in a way that help elucidate meaning without being distracting? Is the layer reliable? Is it performant? Does it draw quickly? Are you maintaining it and making sure that it doesn't go down when people really need it? Have you configured pop-ups so that people can interrogate the data, click on the map, and learn more about what they're seeing? Do you have a well-defined legend that helps people understand what they're seeing? And have you followed best practices for sharing and documentation with a nice thumbnail and fully documented the provenance of where the data comes from and what it can be used for? So I think it's great that you all can go to Living Atlas and trust that these things will be there, and because Esri is being careful about what goes in, and we hope that those of you who do see yourself as a authoritative data provider will think about contributing your content to the Living Atlas so that other people can discover it and make use of it. So what's coming next for the Living Atlas? Well, we've shown you a lot from the National Weather Service, but soon we are excited to have some contributions coming in from NASA. I think the ones that will be most relevant to this crowd is global precipitation data coming from GPM and global flood detection coming from MODIS. So a lot of what you've seen today has been very US-centric, but we're certainly hoping to get more international data into the Living Atlas so that people in other countries as well can start to set up programs like you've seen Jeff showing, and with the help from NASA, we hope that these data products will empower people around the globe and hopefully save a lot of lives. We never had a global source of precipitation data before, so we're very excited to get this GPM data into the Living Atlas. And we're also working on flood inundation forecasts. So you saw the National Water Model before. It estimates the flow rate in rivers throughout the U.S. What we wanted to get to from there is a map that shows actual inundation extent. So to go from the flow rate to the depth, and then from the depth to a polygon of what area near the river will actually be inundated, and then to create a time-enabled forecast map showing over the next few days how the inundation area is forecasted to fill out and develop. So we're really excited about this. We're working hard on it. If you go to the link at the bottom there, you can see some of what we're developing, and hopefully sometime in the future you'll actually be able to pull in a real-time map showing flood extent across the U.S. in real time. Go to any community that you're interested in and just see a model of how deep the water is everywhere and what the flood extent is. Still a lot of science and development going on here, but there are demos you can see, and we're looking for local partners to work with on building this out. So please get in contact with us if you're interested in flood modeling. And with that, I'll go to questions.
Thank you, Daniel. We have a few questions. First of all, can you access the Living Atlas from ArcGIS Pro, ArcMap, and ArcGIS Enterprise?
Yes, you can. I can go back to a few of those slides. The ArcGIS ArcMap is the only one that we haven't gone back and created a very custom way to access the Living Atlas, so that all of these web services can be accessed in ArcMap as well. But in ArcGIS Online, you can see we have this Browse Living Atlas button, and in Pro, there are two places to access the Living Atlas. In your project pane here, there's a Living Atlas button, and in the Add Data tab, you can see here under Portal, in addition to searching all of ArcGIS Online or searching your groups or searching my content, searching the Living Atlas is possible from there as well. So yeah, we really do want to make sure that we incorporate the Living Atlas into all of our apps and products. When you're setting up a portal or a hub or any kind of app, all of those teams are working to add interfaces to the Living Atlas as well, so that you can really have all of this content at your fingertips wherever you are within the platform.
Great, thanks for that explanation. The next question is, what layers consume credits, and how do credits work?
That's a great question. None of what I've shown you today consumes credits. You have to be a ArcGIS Online user. You have to have a login that is part of an organizational account in order to access these layers, but their use does not consume credits. Credits are only consumed by services that what we call premium services, usually things that require some kind of processing on the fly. For example, the watershed delineation service, or tasking a digital globe satellite to give you custom imagery. Credits would be consumed by things like that, and credits are something that your administrator will purchase along with the organizational account, and so you'll have a certain amount among your team, and so you should talk to your administrator about how many the team has among them before doing anything like that. But none of what I've shown you today will consume credits, so that's not something you have to worry about for this kind of mapping.
And just one more point on top of that, but you can share applications with these feeds in them without requiring folks to log in. So you can make public versions of these apps with the live feeds that Daniel has shown, right?
That's a really great point, Jeff. These services do require a ArcGIS Online username to access and to put them into your map, but once you've created your map, if you would like to share your map with people that are not ArcGIS users, you can embed your own credentials within it and create an app that is just open to the public and that does not require any kind of login at all, even though it does have our live feeds within it.
Okay, another question is about using these layers. We talked a lot about visualization. Could you talk more about using them for analysis?
Sure, yes. So we've mostly shown mapping, just visualization, but all of these map services can also be used by our geoprocessing tools and in analysis. So geoenrichment is one easy example that Jeff mentioned already, right? If you have the path of a hurricane or the perimeter of a fire, using that polygon as the input to a zonal average or a geoenrichment tool that will tell you how many people live within that area, how many children, how many elderly people, how much dollars in commercial real estate. That sort of analysis is the first and easiest example. But really, I mean, if you think about all of what ArcGIS can do, all of that is available to you. So you can take these features and you can buffer them. You can take flood inundation areas and use them as a barrier in your routing app to make sure that your emergency vehicles aren't routed through a flood when they're trying to get to an emergency, right? These live feeds can be incorporated into any GIS process that you are doing.
Okay. The next question is about the water flow model and wondering if there's a minimum size or flow rate necessary.
Is there a minimum size or flow rate necessary for the National Water Model? The National Water Model is basically the entire NHD plus, so it's 2.7 million river reaches. It's a live map. You can click on any one of them and see the current estimated flow and forecast. So things don't drop out of it when they get too low. In fact, I think it's a useful map for looking at drought as well as for flood. It's really just a water model of the whole country's river network. So even if the flow in a river is estimated to be 0, right, that line is still there, and you can click on it and see, okay, it's 0 CFS right now. The forecast is, you know, either going to remain 0 or, oh, in 3 days there's a storm and maybe there will be some water in this river, right? It's a constantly running explicit forecast, and so nothing would drop out of it just because the flow is too low.
Okay, that's really interesting.
And if you're asking about size in terms of the river reach itself, it's anything in the NHD plus. So yeah, there might be creeks in your neighborhood that are not part of the NHD plus and therefore are not receiving forecasts. But there are quite a lot of rivers in it. I mean, like I said, 2.7 million river reaches are getting a forecast every hour, and that does include a lot of the very small perennial streams and creeks across the country. So if you just look what the NHD plus covers, that's what's covered in these forecasts.
Okay, and the last question is about contributing data to the Living Atlas. Can you talk a little bit about that process and changes that may occur by the ArcGIS Living Atlas team? What are they going to do to the content, I think, is the question when they receive it.
That's a great question. So all we do is evaluate in or out. If you're hosting the data, we can't touch it. We can't make any changes to it. It's just a question of, will people browsing the Living Atlas see it, and when they click on it, you know, they'll be sent to your service. So you know, it's still hosted by you and under your complete control. But yeah, we just decide whether or not it's you know, it should be included in our gallery and shown to other people who are browsing the Living Atlas.
Okay, thank you so much to Jeff and Daniel, and I hope everyone listening in really enjoyed this hour with us. We have their contact information here, and you are welcome to follow up with them. In addition, we will be responding to the questions that we didn't get to. And there were a couple questions about if it's recorded. Yes, the webinar is recorded, and we will send an email to everyone. If you'd like to view that again, or if you missed a part of it, you can catch up or share it with other members in your team. Please feel free to share feedback with me with this email address, or let us know of any other ideas you have or something you would like to learn about in a webinar. We would love to hear that from you. We're always sharing things on Twitter, and we also welcome you to be involved in our GeoNet. So thank you all very much for your time, and we look forward to being in touch with you in the future.